Hi guys, thanks for tuning into another episode of Nuggets News or our monthly Ethereum update. This month is actually going to be a bit of a look forward. So Anthony and I are going to cover what we're looking forward to in 2021, the different sectors, some predictions price-wise, maybe some projects and industries we're most bullish on. But yeah, how was your break, Anthony? Do you have a bit of time off? And ETH's been on fire lately, so how are you seeing things in general?
Yeah, it's good to be back. Didn't get much of a break, I think, over the Christmas New Year's period. Like as you said, ETH's been on fire. I mean, it did a lot of its price moves during the holidays, which means that I was staring at my phone, at lunch with family and stuff. And they, of course, didn't understand why I was so, plastered to my phone and looking at it. But yeah, it's been a good few weeks, I think. And I mean, it's summer down here for us in Australia now, so it's been very, very nice.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable weather at the moment, which is not something to complain about. And it's also funny with these big cycles how a lot of the people in the US and Europe they talk about when we get into summer, that's when crypto markets will really start to rally. And it's like, well, yeah, that's fine when everyone else is, because it is when you kind of get outdoors and chat to people and whatever. And we saw a little bit in Australia when everyone shields their friends and family crypto over Christmas and New Year's. But yeah, these cycles are becoming very clear now when we look at the charts.
Yeah. It's always funny whenever I hear someone talk about like DeFi summer. That was during our winter, which is pretty funny. And I'm like, because I think not much of the world follows the way our seasons go on the southern hemisphere. So you
Yeah.
always got to readjust. But it sometimes get caught catches me off guard. I'm like, what? DeFi didn't pump during? Oh, okay, the northern hemisphere
Yeah.
summer.
And then we just refer to crypto winter as like a period of 2 years as well. So
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
cool. Okay. So, I mean, in general, the things that I've been talking about for, years and just drumming into people, the sectors that I'm most bullish on, DeFi, I think everyone's familiar with that. Gaming, NFTs, DAOs is one that we probably haven't covered a lot. And the other one is kind of dWeb. So maybe, do you have any thoughts on like NFTs or DeFi in general? And we'll maybe cover some of these other two we haven't covered a lot after.
Yeah, I think obviously DeFi has been a huge narrative over the last few months, right? Everyone's pretty familiar with it. A lot more people are cluing into the kind of value there, and we've obviously seen the prices move up of the different tokens and the amount locked in DeFi kind of explode. NFTs kind of followed along, I think, in DeFi summer a little bit, but not as much as it has been lately. I guess the past few weeks, more people are cluing into the NFT space and getting more involved there. We had over I guess like the past 3 or 4 days a lot of debate around CryptoPunks, which is the original NFT on Ethereum, and one sold for like $700,000, and people were like, why is this worth so much? Like they don't understand it, and everyone was like debating. And really, at the end of the day, it comes down to like scarcity and rarity, right? If something's rare and it's coveted by a number of people, then they're going to try and outbid each other to buy that thing. So yeah, and NFTs, that whole space is there's a lot going on. That's why it's kind of hard to invest in it. It's like, do you invest in the NFTs themselves? Do you invest in the projects building on top or the marketplaces? Like Rarible has their own token that you can buy. But that token hasn't really performed too well as opposed to the NFTs themselves. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess right now, but I think we're getting a clearer picture of where that kind of I guess like narrative is going and how better to invest in it.
Yeah, we'll probably do a bit of a deep dive into NFTs and gaming as well with Maddie on the channel because he's becoming a bit of a guru in the space as well, old DCL blogger. But I think one thing we have seen there, just in general, is the non-crypto community. So whether it's been artists or now, maybe it's the basketball, NBA crowd that just it sort of piques a bit of interest. And a lot of mainstream people in general have got into Ethereum lately. Bitcoin has just clicked. It seems like it took a matter of weeks or a couple of months for it to become, oh yeah, like this is a real thing. It's a big deal. It's not a bubble. And now Ethereum is going to go through that journey of, oh, so it's not just another cryptocurrency. Oh, it's actually a technology and this deplatforming, this censorship. Like every single day, there's another reason. Like Jack Dorsey talking about building decentralized Twitter. There's so many reasons why people are going to say, oh, okay, I kind of get that now that there's a practical example of why Ethereum and decentralized technology is important in general.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's always that kind of leap that people have to make to understand the importance of these things because, you're used to life as it is, right? You're used to centralized institutions. Depending on where you live, you might be more privileged in other countries. Like in Australia, we're pretty privileged with how we live here. and we haven't had to deal with the mass censorship like some countries are doing right now, where some countries will even shut off access to Twitter via kind of shutting down the mobile networks essentially, so people can't spread information. We don't suffer that in Australia, the US to an extent, and other countries as well. Other, I guess, like more, I guess, like democratized countries. So the fact that we are in a privileged position means that for us to make the leap, or for a lot of people to make the leap for where we live, is a lot harder. It's when and it goes back to not just decentralizing Twitter and things like that, but think about Buenos Aires and their kind of uptick in crypto because of the hyperinflation, right? We haven't suffered that on the Australian dollar, the US dollar yet. Maybe we will one day, but it's until it happens that most people won't realize the importance of it. So I think, yeah, we're going to get there. It's just a slower uptick for us, but we'll see it, a more kind of like a uptick in these places where it does actually affect their everyday lives.
Yeah, and the same with DeFi. I think we're kind of going to this place now where we're starting to do things that aren't possible. Like even Cream coming out with that idea of the Iron Bank, and we're starting to, everything that they poked holes at, or the maxis or the naysayers about, oh, what's the point of a loan if it's got to be collateralized? Well, now we've got uncollateralized loans, and one by one we're solving all these problems and scalability. So we're kind of getting there, and we're going to start to do things that you can't do, and we're already doing that in DeFi space in many ways. But like Anthony said, those things are way more important for the unbanked once they can start to build a business compared to us in Australia. On that as well, in terms of the censorship, this is a good segue into like the idea of the decentralized web. And what I've been telling people is now we've kind of got like the software, like blockchains and the dApps that sit on top of those. We've actually got to go down a layer to the hardware stack. And there's an old project called Nexus. So not Nexus Mutual, Nexus. They're doing the Cube satellites. And then you have like a mesh network and ground stations where people can like put a little satellite on their house and they can relay to the next one. So that's the idea of the decentralized internet. And then we want to have like decentralized file storage and decentralized computation, and the graph, they're doing decentralized indexing. MetaMask uses Infura at the moment, so that's like a centralized service. So we want to have decentralized nodes and whatnot. So one by one, we're just going to decentralize like every single component and layer of the internet, all the way through to the software and the app and the end user. And that, I think people are finally kind of clicking, going, oh, that is the grand vision where everything is fully unstoppable.
Yeah, and I think the hardware side, unfortunately, is going to take a bit longer because it's less scalable, right? Software is very, very easy to scale because you already have all the infrastructure built out, right? And you can just build on top of it. Whereas if you want to replace the infrastructure, right, or the hardware infrastructure, it takes a long time. And you mentioned that Nexus project. There's also projects like Foam as well that have been around for a while, and they move very slowly because it's very hard to scale it. But and I mean, decentralizing the internet and decentralizing networks in general on the hardware level have been around, before even Bitcoin existed, right? It's been around for decades, but we've never had maybe an incentive to do it, as powerful as we do today. And we can use crypto economic incentives as well. I mean, there's a project called Helium that is trying this too, and they have a token, and people are setting up these nodes to kind of mine the token and things like that. And I think that's how you bootstrap it, because that's how Bitcoin was bootstrapped on the hardware side. People bought miners, developed miners, right, and used them because they were getting paid to do so. If you're just saying people, oh, just do it for free, right, on a volunteer basis, that's just not going to work in a scalable manner, right? It's a hobby then. It's not really a kind of a company or something that economically benefits a vast number of people.
Yeah, and that kind of gets into an interesting like thought experiment about, well, in future, are we going to have? We've already seen like chip companies proposing setting up in the US, so mining's becoming less dominated by China. Maybe we have 3D printers that can start to print out these little satellites or something. So I just think it's going to become easier and easier, or there's going to be economic incentives, whether it's like Gitcoin or other crowd-funded projects. There's so much money in this space now, and there's a lot of very, very big treasuries that I think are going to put this money to work. But it's for the good of the community. If everyone kind of says, well, hold on, if we all put in, $1,000, all the big projects, we're going to be able to raise enough millions, and then, hey, put your hand up if you're an Ethereum address and you're happy to have these things sent to your house in Australia, or hey, we need someone here. And then we start to have, well, we've actually got 1,000 ground stations around the globe of people in the Ethereum community that are happy to support. So I think we're kind of going to get there. I don't know what it looks like, but for the first time ever, there's a lot of money and there's a lot of passion and there's a lot of sort of libertarians that want to see this all happen.
Yeah, I think we can get there. It's just going to take. I mean, I think it's still going to take a couple of decades if you want to realize that vision. It is definitely something that's not going to happen overnight. But meanwhile, we're still going to be building out this decentralized infrastructure with DeFi, right? That's going to be a lot easier to scale, and I think we're going to see over the next few years that become like pretty massive.
Decades. I'm hoping for a few years, Anthony. I don't know.
The hardware, it's just hard with the hardware side of things, in terms of just scaling it out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even with crypto economic incentives, you just think about how big the world is and how hard it would be to, I guess, replace the existing internet infrastructure with something that's decentralized, and it's expensive. Like governments are usually the ones that first set up this infrastructure, right? And then they sell it off to private companies or whatever. And it's literally billions and billions, if not trillions, of collective dollars around the world to set up this infrastructure and to maintain it, right? To make sure that it's reliable. It's very hard. So that's why I'm kind of like saying it's going to take a little while.
Okay.
Maybe we can do it faster, but yeah, I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, okay. I'm hoping that maybe we can have like these components maybe built into like phones, or there'll be like crypto specific phone companies that come out, or we've got a few of these little plug and play devices starting to pop up. So I'm hoping there's a kind of fast tracked way. But yeah, let's dive into DAOs. So this idea of a decentralized autonomous organization, it's a very powerful one. It's one that has been around for a couple of years, but it didn't really take off. So like DGX DAO, pretty disappointing. Aragon recently, pretty disappointing. And this is the problem that I've run into, is governance. So how does a project that's trying to be decentrally governed, the team is kind of got to start it off and bootstrap it. Then they've had a clash of ideas. So this is one that I think has been a huge issue. Like look at EOS, that governance was always going to be the issue. And now Dan Laramie's walked out on that, and the block producers are all the big exchanges. So I think that governance is something that is still up in the air about how best to do it all. But what are your thoughts on DAOs going forward?
Yeah, I think it's funny because governance is a thing that's been around obviously since humans existed, right? How to govern people, how to manage people, how to make sure people are aligned, and I think maybe there's a bit of naivety within crypto that we could solve it overnight, right? Or we could make something better overnight, and I don't think that's the case. I mean, we saw recently with Aragon that the team, the original team, basically all left essentially, and that was over governance decisions, right? Over people decisions. And then that's what makes investing in this space very hard too. You don't know what's going to blow up, what's going to be around. I think DAOs and the way they work can work in like a very small capacity. Like if you have a treasury that's managed by a DAO of token holders or protocol politicians, they like to call them, a small group of people that get delegated tokens to them to vote on things, that can work. But it's just very hard to scale. I mean, this is just replicating what we already have within a democracy, right? You have representatives that represent their voter base, and then, for better or worse, it works. I mean, it works to an extent. So that's what I guess Synthetics is trying to set up. They've got like a handful of people that they're basically calling, protocol politicians, or like the Spartan Council, they call it. And then the token holders can delegate to them, and then they make the protocol level decisions as the DAO, essentially. I think that's the better model. I don't think you can have, the craziness of everyone voting on everything at all times, no delegations happening, the conversations being split off, people disagreeing, no one knowing what's going on. I think, yeah, that's how it's going to go going forward with DAOs, especially for the bigger projects. They need to function correctly. They can't just stop and not evolve, right? Because they're going to get leapfrogged by the faster moving projects, right? So, Compound and kind of Uniswap. I mean, Uniswap's governance right now is a mess, right? Because they just kind of put it out there, the token, and they're like, you guys figure it out. And it's like, well, that's not going to happen. You need that central party from the start, right? To kind of like manage the community, to get it out there, to build up this kind of governance process. And I think that's what Synthetics is doing right here, actually.
Yeah, no, I completely agree about the naivety. We've seen it time and time again. Like MakerDAO is a great example where just the number of people actually like that take the time to vote. It's just the big VCs that have massive holdings, and so it's pretty centralized to begin with. The same with like the delegating or different blockchains. We've just seen that so few retail investors know how to do this, or they've got their tokens on exchanges and they don't even really know how to use a wallet and engage and vote properly. So yeah, it's a massive problem that people are yet to solve. And I think that's probably, yeah, once we get the better interfaces and wallets and whatever, we might get people that are more active. But the other end of the spectrum is, like you said, getting people to kind of do it for you. Like, is it the power pool index, or these places where you can almost put your tokens into these pools and then you give the governance power to the people that have those pools? Or, what are some of the examples of what we've seen there?
Yeah, it's like this pooling governance kind of example that you've given. Power Pools one, us at the Index Co-op are doing that as well. So the DeFi Pulse Index, which some people might be familiar with, is an index of DeFi tokens. And in there, some of those tokens can participate in the governance of the different protocols. And then what ends up happening is that we have this kind of meta governance going on where the index token holders, so Index is the native token of the Index Co-op, they can vote on governance proposals for Compound and Uni, and then the Comp and Uni tokens in the DeFi Pulse Index are actually the things voting on these things. So we have like basically protocols voting on protocols, right? And it's like, then that's what I say when I say meta governance. And I think that's actually a better model, an even better model, because you get to basically have these communities who care about governance, right, governing your platform. And the DeFi Pulse Index has a lot of these tokens, so they actually do have a pretty loud voice. So it's not just a small thing. And that's what it's like pooling governance, which I actually think works as well. The delegates and the pooling of the governance. And then I guess that pool becomes a delegate essentially, right?
We've also seen, have you seen the X tokens, where you like put your coins into their contract and it'll do the staking and rewards for you. But there's also like an A and a B version if you want to vote on like yes or no. So this is, abstracting a lot of the harder parts for the beginners. So we're going to get there. It's just very interesting to see the different approaches at the moment. You're familiar with that project?
Yeah, I'm definitely familiar with it. Yeah, yeah. I haven't looked too deep into it, but I know that there's a bunch of these, projects trying to tackle this stuff. And you're right, abstracting it away, making it as easy as possible for users to participate is going to go a long way to maybe get over that voter apathy for some people.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of covered most of those categories, unless there's any others, Anthony, that you're excited on, bullish on. We kind of touched on NFTs, but maybe I think just gaming kind of relates to that a bit. But the virtual world space, you guys know how much I love Decentralised, and they've just partnered with Atari in the past 24, 48 hours. I think Grayscale had an announcement there as well. But any other thoughts on that sector?
Yeah, I mean, the NFT space, I mean, falls into gaming as well and things like that. It's a very broad space. I mean, there's art too, right? And gaming. There's NFTs for like insurance kind of cover as well. Like you can NFT your insurance policy essentially. So it's very broad. But I think what most people talk about when they talk about NFTs is kind of the art, the stuff like CryptoPunks and the gaming stuff. But there's so many more use cases other than that. But that might be less exciting, more boring, right? Like no one cares about an insurance policy being an NFT outside of like the hardcore kind of people in that space, but still very important, I think.
And anything on gaming? So just sort of putting NFTs aside, or just virtual worlds. I'm really excited about all this. We're starting to see the first crypto games come out. I think that's going to bring in a lot of gamers and streamers as well. That kind of industry has got a bit of a history with like digital monies and golds and World of Warcraft, Minecraft. Do you think that has the capacity to bring in a new wave of people that don't really care or familiar with crypto but are going to start using it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the way I like to think about Ethereum is that there's a lot of doors to come into the Ethereum ecosystem. It's not just DeFi, it's not just buying ETH. You have the NFTs, and then gaming is a huge door where there's a whole, obviously, I mean, so many people, are billions of people who enjoy and play games and are used to these concepts of like digital items, digital money, and all this sort of stuff. And I think there's a few games out there like Axie Infinity, Gods Unchained. There's a bunch of them, right, that are kind of like they've got a user base and it's growing. I just think that we need to obviously work on scaling there as well as a big part of it, which Gods Unchained is doing with their Immutable X decentralized exchange. Axie Infinity has their Ronin scaling technology that they're bringing to the table. So once we kind of figure out that, and then we can onboard even more people. So yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a big door in. And I think, we might even see like AAA video game companies, incorporating some of this if their customer base demands it too, and that's kind of going to get the snowball kind of going as well. But yeah, at the moment it's still very early days, but I think it can turn into something much bigger.
Yeah, the thing about it that I think is exciting is cutting out the middleman and you hear about these little independent gamers versus the big companies. It's a little bit like the banks versus the little guy in the financial world. So once you can just creative expression, I think that's going to break down those barriers to entry and crowdfunding. For all the bad that ICOs did, I think it did show you that like peer-to-peer funding of any idea or concept is still very powerful, and we're probably going to see a bit of a revive of that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, like ICOs kind of put a bad name to crowdfunding within the crypto space, but I think the idea is still sound. It just needs to be done in a different way. It needs to be done in a more scalable and more friendly way. Not just having, all these kind of ICOs raising hundreds of millions on white papers, right?
Yeah.
You need something tangible there. So yeah, definitely excited to see the experiments there.
So you mentioned Gods Unchained. Let's just talk about scaling. So in general, we've got those immutable X solutions. We interviewed Robbie in Gods Unchained the other day. NFTs being able to scale. There's a lot of games that do have second layers. Like even Funfair had their Fate channels, state channels. So I think that's cool to see them being at the forefront there. The other one that's come a long way is the optimistic roll-ups, and we've seen synthetics kind of roll that out. Pardon the pun, but where do you see that? I think we're going to go a long way. So we've kind of already hinted at the like Aave and Uniswap being next, and once you have those big players, then that's going to free up a lot of block space for others. But I think Amisa Go have done a decent job. Raiden are out there battling away. I think there's still a lot of different ones. Fuel Labs, X Diet, tinkering at the sides. I don't think there's a clear winner yet. I think will probably be one or two main ones, but I still think those little niche ones are going to find products that need that technology rather than, we can't use optimistic rollups. We need Raiden's Lightning Network for what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, 2020 was kind of the year of layer two going out of the research phase and into the development phase and starting to see stuff come to mainnet. And I think 2021 is going to be the adoption phase for layer two. We have a lot of adoption already happening with Loopring. So on their ZK rollup exchange, they have over $100 million of value locked in there, which is awesome, right? I mean, that may seem small, but that's on layer two, right? This is on a brand new layer that people have to get familiar with again, need to know how to use again and learn about all the different things on there. And then, as you mentioned, Synthetics is rolling out their optimism stuff. Uniswap's going to go there. Aave's hinted at it. Everyone's moving to layer two, and I think that we're going to see that happen this year and the adoption happen as well. And then, into 2022 as well, of course. But that's definitely the biggest narrative right now because we know that the gas fees on Ethereum are going to be persistent for quite a while. I don't think they're ever going back to like under 10 Gwei or anything like that, even with the scaling solutions. There's just too much demand to use the Ethereum network. Even in ETH2, the base layer is still going to be obviously limited, and then we're going to still be scaling via layer two. So if we do that now and all the projects get used to it now and everyone adopts it, then it'll be seamless. Once the ETH1 merger into ETH2 happens, it'll still all be the same. There won't be anything different for end users. And it'll just be a nice seamless experience where we get even more scalability because of sharding, but we can just do it in the same way on layer two, which is really awesome, I think.
Yeah. So a couple of things there. If you haven't used Loopring Pay already or like ZK Sync, I'd recommend just playing them out. Open an account, because you've got to go from layer one to layer two. So once you do that, it's kind of done. And you'll see how quick and instant these payments are. And the Loopring guys gave me a code as well. So I can't remember if it's like Nugget or Nugget's News. But if you go over there, that I think gets you like the discounted fees or something. But check all that out because that is something that, again, is getting better and better. The movement from going from layer one to layer two and back. Once we abstract that away so people don't even know they're using it, it's going to get better and better. And like Gitcoin grants this year is an example where they trying to get people to use the ZK scaling technology by default. So when I fund 100 projects, if I do it through that technology, it might cost me $1 or less in fees rather than imagine doing 100 on-chain transactions one by one and paying $10 each time. So yeah, that's a great example there. We've just named all those things that are on ETH1, but that's going to complement once we go to ETH2 because proof of stake also scales as well as that sharding where we break the network up into, I think it's 64 pieces instead of every node doing everything. So we're going to have like little sectors. So yeah, that's all coming together, and that's going to get us to millions or hopefully billions of transactions over the next few years, where we can really support all the different things that we see just on the normal internet.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. And you were talking about, I guess, those fast withdrawals from layer one to layer two, that fast movement between. Loopring's actually pioneering some work here where they actually have 30-second withdrawals now from layer two to layer one, which is amazing, right? That's so quick. People were worried that it would take a week, right, or it would take a couple of days, or sometimes I think with ZK Sync it takes up to an hour to withdraw. But that's just in the first iteration. I'm sure they're going to bring that down. But Loopring is really doing pioneering work here where they're bringing that down and making it so it's as seamless as possible for people to go from layer two to layer one, because you still need to do that, right? You can't just live in Loopring's kind of ZK rollup forever. You still need to go to layer one.
Yeah.
But eventually we're going to get to a point where you only need to go to layer one sometimes, right, as an individual. But we still want those fast withdrawals for like the big players who provide liquidity, right? Who do, massive amounts of market making going between layer one and layer two. So that's why I've been saying for a while that layer one Ethereum will become a settlement layer where all the layer twos are secured by it. They settle to it. All the bigger players who can afford the fees will do that. But it won't matter because the users will get all the benefits, all the cheap fees, all the scalability of layer two. And that's where they'll do all their business. And it'll still be secured by Ethereum, which is the most important part.
And like when you say 30 seconds, you might think, oh, that's still really slow by like traditional standards. But some of these you've got to wait like a week for a challenge period. And that's where Robbie and I were talking about the other day. Well, if you've got a specific NFT, then that becomes difficult because if you're just using Ethereum, the team or the project or the protocol can kind of almost take that risk for you as a little end user and say, oh, well, we're going to take the chance that everything will be fine. And if there's a challenge, well, we can replace that one ETH with another ETH. But you can't really like replace that one God's Unchained if a week later you find out that there was a challenge and it wasn't the right thing to give them and it's already moved on chain now. So that's these different trade-offs that different scaling solutions have.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And I think, if you want to use a comparable, if people think 30 seconds is slow, you could say it's the same as withdrawing from a centralized exchange to your wallet or whatever, or depositing in. When you deposit, you have to wait for a certain number of confirmations. That's for security reasons. And it's the same reason why you have to wait to get back to layer one is for security. It's all to secure your assets, and that takes time. It's not going to be instant, and that's a good thing. You want it to be as secure as possible.
Yeah, or even further, like when you sign up to an exchange, we're doing it because of security and trust, and we're getting rid of all that to decentralize it. So 30 seconds, can you imagine if it only took 30 seconds to sign up and KYC? Some people were waiting weeks in that bull market. So that's probably another good example there. Are there anything else in that sort of little niche, Anthony, that you're excited about or things I've missed in the scaling world?
I think there's two different types of scaling with Ethereum. There's layer two, which is secured by Ethereum, and then there's side chains, which have their own kind of security. And now sidechains can be anything. It can be other blockchains, other layer one blockchains, right? It can actually be centralized exchanges. It can be anything that bridges to Ethereum. And sidechains are obviously a lot less secure because they're not secured by Ethereum, but they're fit for a lot of different niches, I think. So, I mean, you can imagine something like a decentralized Twitter or something like that, right? It doesn't need the highest grade of censorship resistance that Ethereum offers you. You could run that on a side chain, still bridge into Ethereum, right? Have less security, but it doesn't matter too much, right? And then you can even have those kind of side chains, I guess like settle into Ethereum too in a way. Whereas if they go rogue and something happens there, you can rebuild it from the kind of settlement that happened onto Ethereum and things like that. Kind of like a timestamp or a hash stamp, I guess.
Like a checkpoint or something.
Yeah, like a checkpoint. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So that sort of stuff I think is going to happen as well, because layer two Ethereum that's secured by Ethereum, it makes perfect sense for financial use cases because you need that high security. But there are a lot of use cases that you just don't need super high security for, but you still want to, decentralize it out, make sure that it's not just one central party. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of that pick up as well. I mean, there's tons of projects working on this. XDAI Stake is one, Matic Network, Scale, SKALE, and as I said, other layer one blockchains can also do that. And they're all bridging into Ethereum as well right now. We're seeing all these bridges spin up because Ethereum is where the party is, right? Everyone wants Ethereum's liquidity, Ethereum's assets, and that just actually makes Ethereum stronger. and by scaling it out a little bit too, and by bringing even more network effects into Ethereum, which I think is cool.
That's probably a big change we've seen recently as well. A lot of Ethereum killers or things that were adversaries and competitors are now talking about, like, Solana or Near Protocol, Cardano, these projects that come out and say, hey, we want to do like ERC20 tokens like compatible, or we want to be able to plug in and just go from this to that. So you're putting your trust in the set of rules of that other protocol, but hey, they can come back to Ethereum as well. So it's all about like complementing and integrating. Polkadot is probably a great example here, where they've got I really like the model that they've got with parachains and everything, but I think that again is going to end up like plugging into Ethereum.
Yeah, it's funny because some of these other things are definitely competitors and they're positioning themselves as that. And maybe they realize it, maybe they don't. But by bridging into Ethereum, they're actually just reinforcing Ethereum's lead and network effect, right? Because it's just basically saying, well, we don't have enough of a network effect to survive on our own. We actually need to bridge in, right? Which just brings more users to Ethereum anyway. So it's all, I reckon it will be all complementary. But I think that by bridging into Ethereum, it'll just mean that Ethereum remains the market leader in terms of liquidity and the assets that it has, and where everyone does most of their stuff. And maybe these other chains carve out niches. I don't think most of them will survive long term and get usage long term. But I mean, some of them will. Even though I think Polkadot is a competitor, they at least have some sort of developer ecosystem. They at least have things building on top of it, even if it's only in a small capacity. But there are a lot of other chains that, I don't know, they've been around for a while and there's not much happening, right? I don't want to bash any particular project, but unless you have people building on you and you have dedicated people building on you and apps on there, then your project's just really not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm happy to bash Tron. So last week we saw Tether on Tron, I think, surpassed Tether on Ethereum. Now, you look at that and you go, okay, well, that's fine. Like, does Tether necessarily need to be on Ethereum? No, not really. And if I know personally, if I'm going from one exchange to another or to somewhere that offers that, if I can pay zero fee on Tron or pay $20 on Ethereum, I'm going to use the free option, and then I'm just going to switch it back on the centralized exchange back to Ethereum. And so you look at the Tron model and you say, well, economically, how can they survive? That's not feasible to just let everyone do everything for free. How is that going to be secure long term? And it's not. So these are all the trade-offs where it's great short term, but long term it's just not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just, as you said, a scalability thing where Tether doesn't need censorship resistance, right? I mean, Tether, the token USDT actually has like a backdoor, right, where they can just freeze your assets whenever they want. So it doesn't matter if Tron's centralized or whatever, because Tether's also centralized. So like you're still not getting any security guarantees by using Tether on Ethereum, right? Maybe you are in some way, but at the same time, it's just like it doesn't really make sense. So maybe we see. I mean, Tether partnered with Emise Go as well to kind of do this scaling stuff, but Tron actually has more network effects than Emise Go right now because different exchanges already support the Tron blockchain, right? Whereas I think only Bitfinex supports Emise Go right now, maybe some others that I didn't see. But once we have more of those layer twos on Ethereum, get more network effects, they'll replace Tron, I think. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't know. Yeah, Tron's it's just weird.
I agree. And I think it will come back to the different incentives. And if people can see that, Misigo might be about to pick up its network effects, and they say that all exchanges need to hold 10,000 OMG, and it's like a thing where they can stake and earn a high yield. And then they can say, well, hold on, we can get our high yield with ETH2, we can get our high yield with Amisa Go, maybe XDAI, and we can stake our stake tokens or whatnot there. So it's going to come back to those economic incentives and the network effects. I think that's where we have a bit of an opportunity. So yield in general is probably another thing we should talk about, where I think for these competitive chains, you go down that list and you look at, Tezos was offering this high yield. Whatever else it is, name another proof of stake chain, they are all sitting around that 5, 10, 15% model. But now ETH2 is coming out and sitting in that same range. You look at the risk to reward of, do I want to own, like, the ETH stamped itself as a blue chip now, or do I want to own token number like 20 remember back in 2017, people were telling me, hey, look at this proof of stake, it pays 100% yield. It's like, yes, but that's, in some tiny shitcoin, and it fell 99% over the next week. So it doesn't matter if you got paid 100 or 90% reward, whatever it was. So I think that is going to bring big institutional interest. When people can see that, oh wow, I can run my node and stake my ETH and get like 10% yield on this, technology is the hottest sector right now. And then you've got that yield. It's just bringing together all those narratives with another reason to be bullish.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit it on the head. I think in 2017, especially, we saw a lot of these masternode projects spin up where, you own X amount of the coin, you can stake and you can earn this really high yield. But not many people actually realize that it's the token price that matters, right? As you just explained. So, ETH is, I mean, even, after this kind of bull cycle is done and then we go into maybe another bear market, I don't think we're going to see ETH fall 95% again. I think ETH as an asset has matured a lot. It's got a lot of institutional interest now coming on board. It's got a lot more liquidity. I still think it will fall, but at the same time, a lot of the people who are staking ETH now bought a long time ago, right? They bought, over the last couple of years, maybe even before that, right? And they're long-time ETH holders. So they're very interested in that. And holding ETH, yeah, I mean, I'd much rather hold ETH than one of these other coins, even if these other ones pay out a much higher yield. And it just does. And also, I guess it's not just ETH. There's a lot of these projects like Aave. Synthetics has been doing it for a while, right? Where they'll pay you, Aave will pay you from the protocol fees for staking your Aave tokens. Synthetics will pay you SNX as part of their program that they're running, which has been very, very profitable over the years, even though the tokens are vested. Same with Sushi Swap and things like that. So there are certain tokens, yeah, that people do indeed want to hold and are fine, yield farming with those. But yeah, a lot of these other ones, I mean, you gave examples of other layer one blockchains. And I remember Tezos was hot for like a couple of months, right? Where the price was going up a lot, the yield was kind of high. But at the same time, the price went down against ETH a lot since then, right? So, and even being kind of stagnant against USD, I think. But also the high yield that Tezos was offering, you have to take into account the entire network inflation as well. So you might be getting like 10%, but the network inflation might be like 8%. So really you're getting like 2%, right? So there's a lot of intricacies here that, especially centralized exchanges, they don't actually make that very obvious to the end user because they want their fees, right, from staking. So I think that's another thing people should watch out for.
Yeah, that analogy that Anthony's just laid out is like, hopefully if people are watching the channel for any length of time, the little bells ring in your head saying this is what the US government do. They tell you that inflation's 2%, and in the background they've printed 25% more dollars. And that's what we refer to as real interest rates. And you've got a massively negative real interest rate, and people go, I want to own something else. I don't want to own US dollars. Or Tezos was hot, shake it. What is it? Like, shake and bake or whatever they're calling it. But people sit there and they look at the price go down. And then instead of having 85% of people stake, they go, there's no projects building here. They run to the exits. And it goes from 85% to 10% of tokens being staked and everyone's selling. These are the things that can change very, very quickly. And it's all about, well, what's the real yield? What's the real value as well? And what's the real sort of incentive and psychology and sentiment behind all this? And that's where I think Ethereum falls back on something very real compared to these other projects. Look at Polkadot that's jumped the rankings to did it get up to number 3 or 4? But you look at
it did, yeah.
It's almost like the regulatory certainty and clarity with what's happened to XRP. That's just put a massive gap between Bitcoin and Ether's blue chips. Tether's still got a bit of cloud over their head, and I'm interviewing Paolo this week, which I can't wait. But then it's no surprise that something like a Polkadot that's got a lot of promise and good tech has jumped up so quickly. And then Litecoin, Grayscale's been buying a heap of it. It's got regulatory clarity. Is it the longest chain without a hard fork or a community split? Anyway, it's got that long track record. And so a lot of the top 10 is changing. I think we've said it before that in a year's time we expect the top 10 to be a lot of sort of DeFi projects, but that has started to change recently.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because one of the most obvious trades to me over the last few months was seeing all the dead weight in the top 30 even, and seeing no DeFi tokens in there at all and being like, this is going to change, right? This makes absolutely zero sense. More people are going to learn about this and clue into this. And that's, kind of why a lot of people bought DeFi tokens and things like that. And now we see in the top 20 even, you have Aave and Uni. Some people consider Chainlink a DeFi token. I think it's more middleware, but still, there's a lot of it's still a good, project and good token and everything like that. So I think we're seeing this massive re-rating where a lot of the dead weight is getting flushed out finally, right? We've waited for a long time, but finally it's getting flushed out. And yeah, the top 10, 20, 30 is going to look much healthier, I think, going forward.
And any thoughts on, like, I talk about how I copped a lot of crap for sushi, and I think like a lot of people were very skeptical about it. They might even rebrand for this reason. But some of the partnerships we've seen and unique ideas, like people just don't take things seriously because it's called cream. And next thing you know, they come out with this concept of this iron bank and lending. So I think the whole fundamentals and the research has gone to that next level. I know even just with us, we've got guys from the US now helping us, Missouri and Delphi. All these research places have got so much better, and now the smart money can kind of like read and start to analyze these things and look at price to sales ratios or fees or whatever it is and say, well, this one's a ghost chain and this one's producing millions of dollars and has billions locked. We're getting this kind of like big mass re-rating.
Yeah, I think it's all marketing and branding at the end of the day for people outside the ecosystem, right? No fund manager wants to go to their LPs and say, we're going to invest in sushi, right? It's like, it just doesn't, for us, it's whatever because we're in the ecosystem. But for them, it's a much harder sell. But that, once you look past that and you actually realize what these protocols are doing, it becomes a lot easier. So I think we're going to see that kind of happen. I think the gains and the money being made and the opportunity is going to be so great that these fund managers are just going to be like, well, this is why we need to invest in this, right? This is the opportunity that we're going to miss. It doesn't matter if it's got a silly name or you think it's silly, whatever, right? Just even look what's happening in the stock market, right? There's silliness happening everywhere, so it doesn't really matter. But if you don't invest in something just because it's called cream or sushi swap or whatever, you just you think the branding's off and doesn't resonate with you. Well, I mean, I don't think that's the way to go about it.
No, and it's kind of almost creates an opportunity because you see even the good crypto funds, you look and they own all this stuff. Like they were big buyers of Wi-Fi. Like when, again, people would give me crap saying, oh, Wi-Fi is dead at like $8,000. And literally that was the bottom when everyone got the most arrogant about, oh, you were so wrong. Next thing you know, it's going back up near all-time highs. The other thing that I was going to get to here is like Raoul Paul is talking about, there's no alpha left in the traditional space. There's so much money being printed and the central banks just want people to spend on anything. And now we see that these stupid things like people putting all their stimmy checks into these or buying GameStop calls to try and get stocks to go up. Like people are literally doing things because they're bored and they've got too much money. And now we're starting to see a bit of inflation in commodities because that was one of the only things that wasn't at record high prices and valuations. And people are going to look at all this crypto stuff and say, this is probably the next big thing. Let's overinvest in this. And we're going to have a bigger bubble that'll lead to a bigger bust. And then out of that will come, plenty of good, like the dot-com bubble. But as long as they keep going down this macro path, then it's just a certainty to happen in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, capital is extremely cheap right now. People have too much of it. Lots of it's floating around. So, of course, it's going into different kind of assets and asset classes. It's not just going to stay in dollars because you don't want to get inflated away, right? As you mentioned, there's what the government tells you it is, and then there's real inflation. And then everything's going to get more expensive because of that. So you need to protect your capital. So I think we're seeing it obviously play out in a big way in the traditional markets because the traditional markets have been around for hundreds of years. People are familiar with them. It is what it is. Crypto is much newer, right? We need to get, more people into the ecosystem, which they will come, I think. We need to onboard a lot more, especially the older, old money as it's called in the traditional system, right? If you look at the amount of money in the system and all the assets, most of them are owned by boomers, for lack of a better term, right? They're the ones who own all the assets. So the people that have the money and they're young now, they're looking for opportunity of where to put their money, and they'll be first into crypto, right? And then later on, when we get this older money coming in, they'll just be buying it at a much higher kind of valuation, right? So the opportunity right now for young people is intense. And if you have the money, if you're well paid because you're working like in a tech career or something like that, you're putting your money into more of these riskier bets because you can afford to, and you're going to get the benefits from it. I think when the rest of the world wakes up to this stuff.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Off mute. Okay. Well, that's probably been getting up there towards an hour, Anthony. Let's round off with a few price predictions. So, you've been out there and even on chain, you made that token set you were telling me about $10,000 ETH. So recently I was a little bit conservative and then I kind of have to re-rate because I just see everything happening, and then I see us get to $1,500 so fast. I looked at the market cap, and Bitcoin got to $1 trillion, and here we are. I think, yeah, of course, ETH can go 5 or 6 x from here with everything happening as more and more sectors take off. So yeah, I do think that $10,000 is very reasonable. We tend to overshoot that target anyway. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at as well. But you've been talking about this for a fair while.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been talking about $10,000 ETH since ETH was in the 100s, basically during the bear. And back then, people called me very crazy. They thought I was insane, right? This is never going to happen because the sentiment was really bad, right? ETH had just gone to 1,400, came down, very hard over a period of a year. And then, as we go up and up and up, and we went to, as you said, I think we went to 1,500 on the latest kind of run up there. $10,000 doesn't look very far away anymore. And especially as the macro environment changed, as we spoke about, as more people like Raoul Paul starts talking about it, he's got a massive kind of traditional finance following, right? And he's calling for $20,000 ETH, right? So I'm looking like the bear now, which is funny how these things change. But yeah, for me, it's still like I think we can get to $10,000 ETH during this kind of cycle. Maybe we go to 20,000 depending how crazy it gets, but as you go higher, the market caps get bigger. It takes a lot more capital to move these things, and you have to do it before the crash comes, right? Before the bear market starts again. So you run out of time eventually because bull markets tend to happen a lot faster than bear markets do. And if we get to that mania phase quicker than we can, at around $10,000, where people are doubling their net worth every day, I think it's going to be hard to go to 20,000 before a massive crash comes.
Yeah. I would probably say a few things that ETH has in its favor will be a lot of these lockups. So we've already got like 3 billion locked up in ETH2. If we have a lot locked up in DeFi, maybe there's some of these other gamings and NFTs and whatever. It could be very, very liquid in terms of the amount of available ETH, and that's what we kind of saw with Bitcoin recently. And people like Bitcoin has a pretty big market cap compared to where ETH could even be going. And so you say, well, hold on, Bitcoin went from 3.5 grand to 35 grand, did a 10x in 6 to 12 months, 6 to 9 months, whatever it was. That's massive, and they got to $1 trillion market cap. So there's no real reason why ETH can't go to 500, 600, 700 billion market cap when there's a lot of a liquid supply as well. So yeah, I think these things are reasonable given what we know crypto bull markets do. But any final thoughts, Anthony?
Yeah, the lockup thing is very important. I think, ETH's being locked up in a bunch of different places, and something about ETH2 staking that people don't know. At the moment, that's actually locked up because you can't withdraw it back to ETH1 at the moment. But when the merge happens and withdrawals are enabled, to withdraw out of staking is actually a minimum of 18 hours. So if you withdraw, right, your stake, it actually takes a minimum of 18 hours to be withdrawn to your wallet. But what ends up happening is the more people that are withdrawing at the same time, the longer that queue is. So we could see, even if people rush to withdraw when they're enabled, we could see potentially months of waiting time for people to withdraw out, which kind of dampens that sell side volatility, where it's not just going to be, a million ETH unlocked all at once and dumped on the market. No, it's going to be a very slow process of getting it out. And that'll, dampen that kind of sell volatility and dampen that dumping there. So that's an important point I think people should be aware of with ETH2 staking.
Yeah, let's dive into that in more detail in next month's episode, because there's a lot of, I've got a lot of thoughts coming to my head already about how that could be used to advantage or disadvantage as well. So awesome. Have a good February, Anthony. We'll catch up next month, and I'll see you kicking around on Twitter now that we've got to ETH all-time highs as well. And geez, isn't there the meme community? And that's probably something that we underrate a little bit. I just think the whole meme culture and whatever could bring a lot more people into the crypto space as well this year.
Yeah, I think so. I think, memes run the world. We're seeing what's happening with Wall Street bets at the moment and GameStop and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think that's something to keep an eye on, and don't underestimate it, right? Memes definitely run the world at this point, I think.
Awesome. And Anthony's been doing a great job with his YouTube channel as well, guys. So I'll put a link to that down below and check out the Daily Gwei. But otherwise, we'll talk to you again soon, Anthony.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, guys. Bye.